Voron crashing calamity, Bowden blowouts, and Prusas that are really frustrating. All this and more, PrintFix Friday, episode 65. Let's get into it. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel and YouTube's longest print fail fix video series. We're on week 65. Appreciate all of your support. And if you're new here and you are going through some print failures, we get it. It happens to everybody. Make sure to leave a like, get subscribed. This is the kind of stuff that you want to see more often. We've got a lot of great fails from you from a myriad of companies and quite a few of my friends. But let's get into it after we tell you about today's sponsor, 3D Musketeers. Print fails suck. They happen to everybody, and we ourselves are not immune to that problem. In fact, got some failures from Wednesday Addams right here, where, fingers. And that's caused mostly from the time-lapse setup. But the nice thing about having a business and professionals who do the work for you is that when those issues occur, they're not your issues anymore. Yes, you pay more than doing it yourself, but when you leave your prints and your CAD work and even your 3D scanning in the hands of capable professionals like 3D Musketeers, you know it's gonna get done. It's gonna get done right. We recognize that not everyone is looking to outsource their 3D printing or 3D scanning or product development, but they do want to support a little bit here on the channel. A couple of bucks in that creator fund every month goes a long way to helping these videos become continually possible. We appreciate all the support that you guys give us through Patreon and YouTube channel memberships. And if you do want to join that, you can click the links down in that description below and kick as low as $1 a month to helping the channel grow. But times are tight this time of year. It is the holiday season. Of course, everyone is saving up their pretty pennies. Maybe for Bambus. I don't know. What are you getting your loved ones for the holidays? What are you hoping to get for the holidays? Let me know in those comments below. And if that's the case, hey, a like, comment, subscribe, and a share goes a long way to helping out as well. Doesn't always have to be money. Your support and letting others know that we exist helps out a ton. But enough of me talking about growing this channel, making it an actually viable business model. Let's talk about some more fails. New to 3D printing and all my prints so far happens weird bubbles. Any advice on how to correct it? Yeah, this is quintessentially a common problem that happens when you're doing models that look like this and you have power loss recovery turned on. What is occurring during power loss recovery is that your printer is attempting to write the G code as it occurs onto the SD card. So it is not only reading G code, but then writing it back in some form of like temporary text file that it overwrites over and over again. And the goal there is if you do have power loss for some reason, the machine saves where it was at and is able to continue when power comes back on, of course, after your input. But on models like this that have a lot of round shapes to them, we find that the buffer overloads very quickly. So what does that really mean? The buffer is how much space that you can work with. That's the amount of RAM, if you will, that can write to and from the SD card. If you overflow that, the printer has to stop and wait for things to figure itself out because it can't receive code, because it can't write the code, and it's a cyclical problem. And this is happening over and over and over and over again. So while it might suck to turn this off, the way to solve it is turn off power loss recovery. If you decide to leave it on, well, this is what's gonna happen. A lot of printers have this feature, and ones that don't have appropriately sized processors and RAM and all that will have this problem. And I believe the comments are going to agree with me on this. Although the first one, it's great. Paint it green, it's cactus now. Absolutely love it. A+ for effort. Yep. There you go. Turn off power loss recovery. That feature writes the current state every so often to the SD card. That takes time and can lead to G-code buffer running empty, which causes the printhead to stop while it waits for more commands, leaking filament while it's waiting. That's that back pressure issue. It happens mostly on prints with lots of G-code that are curves. Yep, that's it. It's a simple thing with a simple solution, but will drive you absolutely up the damn wall if you don't know what you're doing. Next up, we got a fail from my good friend, Sithlord Britt, who needs to be a podcast guest soon. We got to get that sorted. So, Britt, if you're watching, let's talk. Love to have you on the podcast. We have here Britt's 10th anniversary Prusa Mark III's that has suffered probably one of the weirdest blobs I've seen in a while. We've got a broken heat break. Heat break's gone, or she's removed it. We've got random bits of filament. I've never seen a blob of doom look like this. It looks like almost like rock candy, which is odd. From what I found out, we also had a broken heater wire. When you're dealing with trying to care for a blob of doom, a broken heater wire sucks. You have to heat your heat block up in whatever that plastic is on to get it off. If your heater is broken or your thermistor is broken, that's not gonna work. So how do you solve this? It looks like Britt's already ahead of the curve here. She's got a heat gun. You got to use a heat gun. Now be careful. Don't use a blowtorch. If you do use a heat gun, make sure you try to put a nozzle on it with some decent flow direction on it. That way you're not heating up a lot of the ambient area of the printer. And I've dealt with this a little bit, but generally speaking, a silicone sock solves 95% of these problems. Now, how did it happen in the first place? I don't know. What I know is that Britt kind of rode the struggle bus on this one, and I feel bad. This particular machine has been wrought with problems since day one for her. She had a bad motherboard that took a long time via Prusa chat to get replaced, which, okay, I can kind of get. They don't want to just hand out motherboards to people, but Britt is not a spring chicken in this and kind of had to fight more than I would have liked to see. So that's a bit of a bummer. And now to see this happen, it hurts, right? Because Prusas are supposed to be pretty much flawless. And this one has been quite the opposite. As Matt Stoltz here says, community director of Prusa, insert Revo here. Would be a great time for a Revo upgrade, but they're a little pricey. And if you don't want to spend the money on a Revo, then you're kind of stuck like this. Now, what do we need to look for? We need to be looking to get a, in my opinion, new heat block, because at this point it's just easier, new heater, and a new thermistor. While the thermistor might be okay, to me it is so much easier to put in a brand new block with a new thermistor and heater, and maybe just try to get the nozzle out of this if it is something special. If not, Ether-D brass nozzles are cheap, but this to me also brings up the value of having spare parts. We keep a ton of spare parts around. Nozzles, heat blocks, heat breaks, silicone socks, heaters, and thermistors, all of which at least in the half dozen quantity of all of them. But we also have nearing a dozen Mark III's. So I can understand that the average user might not have a large inventory of spare parts, but hey, if you got to make the order, now's the time to get a couple of spares. Personally, I keep a lot more thermistors than I do anything else because they seem to be the most delicate out of anything here. And they're cheap, so it's not that big of a deal at the end of the day. Next up, we got a submission from a Patreon member, Printed Parts. They're asking about the discoloration that we see here, if it's due to poor quality PETG or something else. So this is a pretty generic PETG. Zealtech or Zyletech makes this spool style, or they're one of the larger resellers that utilize this spool style. So I would assume it's made in the same factory. Looking at the striations that we see here, I'm fairly certain it's a color thing, but I did want to point out that we have some retraction issues that we could be working on. I don't believe that this is a moisture issue. It could be, but I'm not seeing it a ton. So I think it's more of a retraction issue. But moisture is not going to cause the banding and striations that we see. But if we look at the edge here, it's not really present in the edge of the print. So the print actually looks okay. It's just a color issue. Now, I'm not a personal fan of this color anyways, so I would say just use a different color, but we can see that they're printing on a Mark III's in an official Prusa enclosure, which is very, very nice. But if you do need this beige color for whatever reason, I would look at trying a different manufacturer with a different spool style to see if that solves your problems. But if you have had the PETG for a while, printing out of a dry box or one of those heated dryer assemblies, we'll link to some down in that description. I've been using the Sunlu S2 for a while now, and I like it. They're just a little expensive. You can get better results if you do print out of a dry box. Is it necessary? Not really, especially if you don't live in a wet environment. Oh, next up, we got an interesting one. This is a Prusa Mini that is a Bowden 3D printer, and the filament has come out of the Bowden tube. This is what happens over time. Remember, filament is mildly abrasive, and it's not enough to damage brass nozzles generally, and that's normal filaments. That's PLA, PETG, no fancy glow-in-the-darks or carbon fibers or anything like that. Those are absolutely abrasive and will ruin other parts of your printer. But PTFE Bowden tube is a wear item, and over time will need to be replaced, because if you don't, it'll eventually have the filament poke through like this. These are, again, items you want to have on hand. And the Mini uses those fancy brass couplers, so a lot of times it's easier just to buy the actual entire assembly from Prusa and just switch it out. You can move over to something that uses the push-to-connect fittings rather than something else, but over time, this is going to happen over and over again. So it is always good to have PTFE Bowden tube spares laying around ready to go when something like this might occur. Generally speaking, if you're printing heavy, every 3 to 4 months is a good time to go ahead and change it. For a printer like the Prusa Mini, it doesn't go all the way into the hot zone, so it isn't all metal hot, and it doesn't go as hot as the Mark III's will with its V6, but it does go beyond what you would consider temperatures for a PTFE lined hot end. And that means that you're not going to wear it out as fast as you would if it was PTFE lined. So really all you have to worry about is burning through it like this. Generally speaking, if you have a PTFE lined hot end, the heat is going to damage your PTFE before your filament has enough time to wear through it. So if you're running something like an Ender or a CR10 that is stock without an all metal hot end, you might not have to worry about this particular problem so much, because you're going to deal with your PTFE expanding and overheating faster than your filament will wear through it. So yeah, again, spares. It's a great way to do it. And again, thank you, local maker MI, for your support on the videos. Next up, a fan submission. This is a friend of Mr. Chris Catlett, who has been struggling with an Ender 2, all the way to getting a really well done Reddit thread. So thank you for putting in all of this effort. We've got some first layer issues here. We've got some warping. So let's talk about the first layer issues. We are too close, and we can see that because our ruffles have ridges. We've got ridges in between the lines. You want your first layer to look like a slab of glass. If it doesn't look like that, then you're either too far or too close. If in between your lines you see a valley, you're too far and you need to add some more squish. If you see a print like this, it is too close, and you need to bring your nozzle away from your print bed ever so slightly. And they did that. And we got a really clean first layer, except the problem is it still ended up warping. Now, an Ender 2 is very similar to a Prusa Mini, where it is a cantilevered system. They're running good temperatures. I'm worried that the speed at 100 might be 100 millimeters a second and not 100% speed. 100% on an Ender 2 should be like 45 to 55 millimeters a second. I don't think I would push it any further than that, just out of the safety of the components of the printer. But they are running easy ABL, which is nice. Those will help you get a better first layer. Solid bed mount, which you want if your printer has an ABL. Runout sensor, which is good, and the unified firmware, which Tim does put a lot of effort into, so I think it should work better. But we're seeing some layer shifting as well. And as we've talked about in the past, it is useful to make sure that you have some Z-hop on your printer. But given that the Ender 2 uses V-wheels, I would check to make sure that the printer can run up and down completely in the Z-axis, as well as the X and the Y, without any of those wheels binding up. If the bearings are failing for some reason, and it can happen, a bad set of bearings, or maybe there's too much pressure causing the bearing to fail, that could cause it to bind up and create these issues that we see. Now, given this one is in the Y-axis, this one is in the X-axis, so I'm not exactly certain if we can call it a V-wheel problem. It is more likely that we had either an extrusion issue or we had a Z-hop issue where something else failed. So the best thing to do here is check to make sure that you are doing Z-hop. If you don't have Z-hop enabled, make sure to go ahead and add it. Normally you want at least double your layer height. So if you're doing 0.2 millimeter layers, I want a 0.4 or larger. If you're unsure, make it 1 millimeter, make it big. It will just increase your print times ever so slightly, but if your print succeeds, doesn't matter. That one's up to you. And then from there, we can look at maybe adjusting the belts and the V-wheels. If they are too tight, we could have some skipping on the motors causing that issue, but I'm gonna hedge a bet and say it is the printer striking the model itself. Next up, fail from my buddy Nero. If you don't know Nero 3D, or Taylor as he's referred to, he was actually a guest appearance in our video where we toured Printed Solid. He was the stand-in, Dave Randolph, getting your orders ready. That was a lot of fun, being able to have Nero in a video and getting to hang out with him. I've never met him before, so getting to hang out with him, it was fun. And we got a P1P failure, and it looks like the cover has fallen off, but apparently that wasn't the cause of it. Joel had the same question that I had. Did the magnet fall off? But nope, PETG blob took out a part and knocked the front off, which caused it to stop. Nice, there's a sensor that detects that. Totally agree here. This is a great feature where it can detect that the front cover has fallen off. Now, why did the PETG blob occur? Do you know? I don't know. Like, I don't even see the failure, to be honest with you. But it looks like it might have taken out this part here, and that created the spaghetti. So we might have had a bit of a blob that the nozzle ran into. Now, traditionally, you can just add in some Z-Hop, and since Bambu Lab Slicer is based off of Prusa Slicer, it should be a pretty easy thing to do. And now they're running really well on Vorons. It wouldn't surprise me if we see Nero utilizing the Bambu Slicer more often, because Nero is one of the big Voron guys, and hanging out with him has really kind of turned me around with the Voron community. I think we got to do a Voron. So what do you guys want to see? I mean, it's going to be an LDO kit one way or the other. Do I have to do a V0 first, or can we go into something a little bit bigger and build bigger machines? Let me know in those comments below. But again, because the P1P is very similar to the X1, it's basically a stripped down X1 where the non-necessary items were removed. Things like the bearings on the top of the Z-axis are replaced with bushings. The nice fancy touchscreen is now a monochrome LCD. The panels are all gone. The hardened machined components are now regular steel. The blower fan for high speed, the light, as well as the camera are all gone as well. And the processing is reduced so that the P1P is unfortunately, even with the camera upgrade, not currently able to do spaghetti detection internally. But I guess Bambu is working on some sort of a cloud feature. Seems interesting, but it's 700 bucks. This is a pretty darn good printer, I think. And if they can work out some of the kinks that occur, this thing will be a monster for those that want to do fast prototyping, because it solves the AMS problem, because it doesn't come with one. It can use it, but it doesn't come with it. But I will give credit where it's due. I like that the printer can detect that its front plate has fallen off and actually pause itself. Because if the front plate is held on with light magnetic pressure, you can effectively use it as a way to detect if something has failed, because it'll rip the front cover off. It's an odd way to do it, but I kind of dig it. I would think it's a pretty easy thing to detect. You just pass a current through the magnets, and when the current is no longer there, it just triggers the printer to pause. Z-Hop is normally the way to solve this. Nero knows this, but it's another excuse for me to add a Bambu Lab failure in here just to frustrate the fanboys out there. Because guess what? Printer failures happen to everybody. These are just the new kids on the block that are supposed to be, you know, top dog, and we're seeing pretty elementary failures come out of them. And I'm not going to chalk this one up to Nero. He is an experienced user, and yeah, we're not infallible, but the rest of the print looks pretty darn good. I don't think it's Nero's fault. I'd be curious to see how it occurred, though, if it was a bed adhesion issue that caused the blob or what, because this piece has absolutely come off, and it looks like we've got a little bit of warping on the part here. But it is nice to see that they're using a textured flex plate now instead of those cool plates. Moving on, we have one of the most interesting fails that I've seen in a long time. We've got a Voron that decided to yeet itself off of its own gantry system. This thing sheared the plastic, and yes, it will buff out on both sides of the x-axis and completely destroyed the print. Now, according to the poster, it said, upon further reflection, the cause of death is this. I have a macro to clean the nozzle at the end of a print. Didn't leave enough room to clear the tool head. Whoops. Update. It seems that just the XY joints are damaged. Pretty fascinating that both XY joints broke. All extrusions and rails seem intact and straight. Now, to me, that is a massive kind of thumbs up toward the build quality of Vorons. They're a real pain to put together. Even an LDO kit is still pretty tough. It is a complicated build. We've had a lot of people say they want me to do a Voron build, so I don't know yet which one we're gonna do, but it is on the list, and I gotta work with Jason to do it, because I want to put together a whole kind of thing for it, maybe give away some filament and all that during the stream, that I am riding the struggle bus to build a Voron. But this is a big deal, right? These are hardcore printers, and shearing prints like this on the layer lines, while it is weakest about the Z-axis, is still pretty darn tough. I don't believe this happened with the nozzle going to clean itself, unless the cleaning motion happens very fast. This printer appears to have slammed into this part here, and when it did that, everything just broke. Now, potentially, the printer has been moving straight down. Maybe there's a little cleaning brush down at the bottom, and it was going there to clean it, and it just kind of slowly ripped itself off. To me, this looks much more like an inertial failure, because we have other bits of spaghetti as well, which tell me that maybe this thing failed differently and was actually still trying to function for a little bit. Now, I will say, having the printed parts, while you might say makes the printer weak and floppy-like, I think it gives it a built-in failure mode that will fail before you start bending extrusions, bending rails, or breaking bearings, because this stuff is cheap and easy to replace. I mean, assuming you're not going to reprint it on this printer. So I don't see that much harm in having breakaway parts that you do on Vorons. Now, was it designed to be breakaway? No, it wasn't. Did it occur that way? Yes. Yes, it did. So now they have an awesome opportunity to not only change the color scheme on it, but to change up the material and how many perimeters. We can see here that there is some infill on it, and when we do parts like this where you are dealing with structural components, I like to do as many perimeters as I can. Remember, perimeters provide strength. Infill provides very little strength compared to perimeters. They're not homogeneous, similar to how perimeters are generally just one solid line all the way around, whereas infill is a lot of starting and stopping generally. But yeah, very interesting failure, and thank you to the Patreon supporter who sent this over. I forget who it was, because this was a little bit ago. This is a really, really cool failure, so thank you. If you remind me in the comments, I'll pin it. Thank you. Anyways, guys, let me know what you thought of this week's fails, and let me know if you could figure out the ones that I did not film this week. And if you are a Patreon member, you're going to love this Patreon edit, because this is not the first time I have filmed this part of the video. Anyways, guys, let me know down in those comments what you thought of these fails, and I will see you next week. Stay safe out there. Don't forget to call your loved ones. And as always, keep making awesome. Have a good one. Oh, I hear the cat. She's got her baby, her favorite little toy she's got in her mouth, and she's meowing. Hey, thanks so much for watching this video, and a massive thank you goes out to all of our Patreon YouTube channel member supporters whose names are listed right next to me at the $5 tier and higher. Remember, if you want to get your name listed amongst these elite Musketeers, you can do so by clicking the links in that description down below and pledging for as little as $1 a month to help make videos like these possible. Right below me will be the entire PrintFixFriday series, where you can go back and look at other failures or times where I've made fun of people, because that happens every now and then. We have one coming up. Submit your memes. Should be a fun one. And right next to that will be our video all on my favorite budget 3D printers of 2022. I'll see you all down in those comments and in the next one. Take care.